We have one more presentation, and that's from the San Francisco International Airport regarding planned closure of 2 runways at the airport. And we have a representative from SFO.
Thank you, Mayor Rain and Vice Mayor Medina. Council members, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight. My name is Doug Yakel. I'm the Public Information Officer at the airport, and I'm also joined tonight by Ara Balian, who's a member of our airport's noise abatement group. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to brief the council on some upcoming runway project this summer. Essentially the closure of 2 of our 4 runways for runway construction. And really I want to talk a little bit about what it is, why we're doing it, and how this might affect San Bruno during the period of the closure. All right, just for a quick overview to get our bearings here, San Francisco Airport has a total of 4 runways. You can see Highway 101 on the left in orange. And the way that we typically use these 4 runways, these are labeled according to their magnetic compass heading. So runways 28 left and 28 right are typically used for landing. Those are the flights you see coming over the San Bruno or the San Mateo Bridge towards the airport for landing. We typically use those for landing, and we use these other runways, 1 left and 1 right, for departures. These are the flights that you see taking off towards Oakland. This project is to install what we call runway safety areas, and simply defined, these are safety zones that surround the end of each runway. They're designed to prevent an aircraft that might have an aborted takeoff or overrun the runway during takeoff or landing to provide an extra margin of safety. This really began through a series of high-profile incidents at other airports around the U.S. There was a Southwest Airlines flight at Burbank, California that overran the runway. Famous shot of it parked in the gas station across the street from the airport. Also in Midway Airport in Chicago, a similar event where there was not enough safety threshold at the end of the runway to allow an aircraft to stop. This is a federally mandated program. It applies to about the 40 largest airports around the U.S., including SFO. This mandate requires that all airports complete their work, complete the installation of these runway safety areas by 2015. We've already completed work on 2 of our 4 runways, so the primary runways we use for landing have already been completed. This final phase is going to focus on those 2 runways we use mainly for departures. So in terms of phases, the FAA provided airports essentially 2 different opportunities to accomplish the mandate. One was to increase the threshold through raw distance. So in other words, if you had enough real estate to add another 1,000 feet of space to your runway, that was one way to accomplish the objective. And that's how we did it for 28 left and 28 right. Now, as you know, we've got a little bit of a facility constraint on these other runways. We've got Highway 101 on one end and the bay on the other end. So we really weren't able to increase the distance by 1,000 feet. So the FAA also gave us the opportunity to install what's called Engineered Material Arresting System, or EMAS. Best analogy I can use, this is similar to a runaway truck ramp. And this is what we're going to be installing on these 2 runways this coming summer. This is a great picture right here of an EMAS system that was used successfully at an airport in West Virginia. It's essentially a cellular block-like material installed at the end of the runway. It's strong enough to stand on, strong enough to drive a fire truck onto, but under the weight of an aircraft, it collapses predictably and allows the nose gear and the main gear of the aircraft to gently sink into the sandy-like material. So you can see in this photo how it was used successfully to safely bring an aircraft to a stop, and this is what we're going to be installing this summer. We've been meeting with the FAA and all of the airlines at SFO to look at a variety of different options on how to get this work done. We looked at closing the runways one at a time, looked at some different delay scenarios. We determined that installing it one at a time would actually increase the amount of flight delays that we would see at San Francisco. So then we looked at the opportunity of maybe shortening the runway and continuing to use a portion of it, but that would take at least 6 months to complete. We'd have flights operating over an active construction site, which we didn't like from a safety perspective, and not all of those flights could use those shortened runways. So the option that was agreed upon was to close both of these runways at the same time, simultaneously. It's the safest, most efficient option, gets the work done in the shortest amount of time, 3 to 4 months, during which time all of our flights, both arrivals and departures, are going to use runways 28 left and 28 right. We've done a lot of lead-up work already in order to minimize the amount of time that we have to have these 2 runways closed. We're planning to begin the closure on May 17th, and the plan is to run it for a period of about 4 months, so that would take us into early September. We do have provisions in place with the contract to provide an incentive to get this work done sooner, and the crews will be working 24/7 to get it done. So if we've got the opportunity to get it done late in August, that would be terrific. The sooner the better. Now, a common question that comes up at this point is you're closing 2 of your runways, you're going to operate all of your other flights on the remaining 2. Has it ever been done before? And the reality is we actually operate with 2 runways all the time. In fact, we're operating with 2 runways only right now as we speak. We use 2 runways regularly anytime we get windy conditions, and so that's very common for us during the summertime. We looked at the data, and in 2013, we used only 2 runways for our operations over 100 days last year. So this is a process that's familiar to the air traffic controllers. Now, in terms of delay impact, normally on a typical day, we're able to handle about 100 flight operations per hour, about an even split of 50 arrivals, 50 departures per hour. When we close these 2 runways, that capacity is going to be reduced about 50% to about 85 flights per hour. So maybe 45 arrivals, 40 departures. During this period, the arrivals are going to be given the priority. So in good weather, we're really not anticipating arrival delays. We still get that summertime, June gloom, some fog. That could cause delays, but when the weather's good, we're not expecting arrival delays. The area we're really focused on is on the departures. Because the runways we're closing are typically used for departing traffic, we're now shifting that traffic over to the arrival runways. So what we're really focused on is addressing the potential for departure delays during peak demand periods. This is a look at a preliminary flight schedule for this summer, and you can see there's really 3 periods during the day when there is a potential for some departure delays. That's 9, 11 a.m., and 1 p.m. in the afternoon. And that's a period where our capacity, or I should say our demand exceeds our capacity. So in terms of mitigating that, we've already had the FAA review and approve the flight schedules to reduce the amount of traffic growth that was going to happen this summer. Originally, the airlines wanted to grow schedules by about 5%. They're actually only going to grow it by about 2% this summer because of that. We're also using a new procedure from the FAA called closely spaced parallel runways. We've been using this since last September. This essentially makes more efficient use of those 2 parallel runways that we're going to be using. And lastly, we're going to be implementing what we call a departure management system. This has been used at JFK Airport for several years now. They used it during their runway closures. The best analogy I can use, it's like metering lights going onto a freeway. It assigns each departing flight a slot at the gate so that when it does push back, it doesn't wait at the end of the runway for takeoff. Airlines like this too because they burn less fuel using this process. So this is good for the environment as well. I want to talk a little bit about the effect that this runway closure is going to have on flight patterns. So let's take a look at a typical day at SFO and the way that aircraft are routed. So with both of those runways open, typically here's how aircraft are routed. Flights that are going to the Midwest, Europe, and the East Coast launch off of those, go over the bay and north towards their destinations, and then on a day, and we have the Southern California traffic that launch off of these runways, make a left turn over Brisbane and head down the peninsula. You also have Asia traffic and traffic to Hawaii launching straight off, going through the San Bruno Gap using what we call the gap departure. So this is a typical configuration today. When we close these runways, what you're going to see is, again, Asia and Hawaii traffic going through the gap, but what you'll also see is flights to Southern California will be launching straight through that San Bruno Gap, making a left turn off the coast and heading south towards their destination. And then that traffic to the Midwest, East Coast, and Europe, they're going to execute what we call a shoreline departure. They launch from the runways, make a right turn over Highway 101, and on east towards their destinations. We've been working with airlines to talk about the importance of following these patterns closely. In terms of evening operations, I want to talk about how airlines schedule their flights and what you can expect, especially after 10 p.m. So typically what you see is Southern California traffic, the way that airlines schedule it, tends to wind down around 9 p.m. So that's really the first thing to go. You do have a handful of flights to Asia in the evening, but really what you're left with after 10 p.m. are those red-eye flights, those transcontinental flights from the West Coast going to places like New York, Boston, and Washington, D.C. So that's really the last piece to wind down, and that's, again, east of Highway 101. Key points here, number one, this is a program all about safety, runway safety areas, improve the margin of safety for pilots that are landing or taking off. As I mentioned, we're a little space constrained at SFO, so we really had to find a solution that existed within our current airport footprint. We weren't able to expand out into the bay in any way. As I mentioned, during good weather, we're not expecting arrival delays. The potential is there for some departure delays, but we expect to mitigate that through this departure management system that JFK Airport's been using. And again, we're about 66% of the market share in terms of the Bay Area airports. We want to retain that advantage. And again, we really want to make this as transparent as possible for our customers. We've got a great page up on our website with more information on this project, including animation that talks about the process. With that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
What do you anticipate we can expect from the noise levels in San Bruno? Increase frequency?
I think really it's going to be increased frequency more than increased noise levels, because the traffic that's going to be added into the mix, it's not additional 747s, it's small commuter type of aircraft, regional jets. These are newer, quieter aircraft. They tend to climb faster than these larger jets. So you will probably expect to see an increase in aircraft frequency during the daytime hours, not so much noise levels.
Anyone else?
Through the chair.
Ken?
Ken?
Is there any construction noise that, on a quiet evening we can, it really travels? So what sort of construction will be going on?
I
Is there
think
any pile
really,
driving or anything?
yeah, we don't expect to have a large amount of construction-related noise at nighttime. They're essentially going to be working on both ends of the runways, one left and one right. I think what you could expect is if you're driving along Highway 101 during the nighttime hours, you're probably going to see a lot of floodlights at that end there, shining light on the construction areas. But we don't anticipate a great deal of overnight pile driving or anything that's going to generate noise in the community.
Okay. Irene?
Will you have something on your website where people can contact you if they have a complaint or a question?
Absolutely. We'll make sure that our noise abatement page is current. And the other thing that we're going to do next week is we're actually going to be sending out a mailer to the residents that reside under these flight paths. So that would include residents in San Bruno, South San Francisco, Pacifica, and Daly City, to advise them that this is coming and to notify them about resources that are available to report a noise complaint.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Anything else? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.